this meeting of the Bylaw Study Committee to order. We have a quorum present. We have no members of the committee participating remotely and currently no members of the public participating either in the room or remotely. So because we're all here in person, I don't have to call the roll. First agenda item being public comment. If we had any members of the public here, they would be invited to comment, but we seem not to have any public comment to all be offered. So we'll proceed to the next agenda item, which is pause to close the meeting room doors so that the hallway noise doesn't interfere. Okay. So the next agenda item is an update on the action item list, and there's nothing additional has come in. Is that correct?
Yeah, haven't seen any additional responses. I know in one of the emails that Skip sent out today, he asked me to add an item. I believe it was related to that appendix.
Oh, the appendix A, yes.
Yeah. So I'll be adding that. I haven't added that yet, but that's the only new item so far.
There was one that I sent on from Evan. That was the 28A update. So I had asked him about, does it make sense to repeal it since it's redundant and incorrect? And he said, we'd probably keep it just updated to match the law and provide some suggested wording for that.
Okay. And we are still waiting for a number of stakeholder responses.
In your conversations with either Evan or William.
Someone's here.
Oh, thanks. Skip, are you there? Here you go.
Give a moment for Skip to get his. Uh-oh.
So am I back in a bad place?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Skip, can you hear us? Testing. How come?
You up because it highlighted your box and it's doing it now.
Yeah, okay, so. The owl, let's see, the Zoom thinks that the owl is picking up all the audio from the meeting room here.
Hey, Dave. Oh,
Chat one.
Let's see. Testing.
Okay, so all right.
So when I turn the audio, when I turn the speaker on my laptop is receiving the audio that the owl is sending.
Yep.
And Zoom seems to think that Skip's audio is enabled. He's not on mute. And video. You really don't need to see my video.
Testing.
Hello, Skip.
But I sent the message in the chat asking if his audio was on. He replied back direct to me saying that he can't hear us. I asked if his speakers were on. He's said his speakers are on.
As far as we can tell, unlike the last time Skip attempted to join us by Zoom, everything here in the room seems to be working as it should.
Yeah.
Ask if he wants to stick around and well, he can hear us. I said he could participate with the chat, but we can hear him, he can't hear us.
Jesus Christ.
You right?
You got a note that I have to restart, accept updates. He's gonna try that.
Okay.
So yeah, so I was just asking, in your communications with either Evan or William, have they given any indication when we should expect to hear back from them? I know we've been hounding on the select board, and we should be hearing from them in a week.
Yeah, I need to get together with Evan and talk about what he and William are planning to do. Yeah. I know a while back, I met with Evan for a while, and he indicated that he is interested in pretty much overhauling the whole personnel bylaw section. I've mentioned this before, but I need to, so I want to touch base with him and find out where he's at with that process, if he started it, when he expects to have something. And that potentially is a fairly substantial amount of work.
Yeah,
And we're not currently under the gun, so if it takes several months before that's complete, that's not going to be a problem for us, I don't think.
yeah, and almost working in reverse, so that we're not holding things up unnecessarily. If he knows that of the, we asked him for a bunch of, say, dozen, articles that we asked him for input on. If he knows there's a handful that he isn't expecting to have comments on, and he could give us kind of the green light to not hold those up any longer, that would be helpful. And then, anything that he is planning on touching, if that takes long, that'll take as long as it takes, but.
Yep, and yes, we have previously been informed that the select board expects to take this matter up at their meeting next week. And beyond that, I've been pestering Bruce about the Affordable Housing Trust. We're waiting to hear from them as well. I suspect they won't have much.
Sure.
But I would like to have them at least tell us if they do see anything they want done.
Yeah. One other that I had noted in I think maybe the last meeting that kind of snuck up on me. I didn't realize we had asked them for as much as we did, but the DPW, we asked for a good number of articles.
Yeah.
We could have Evan try to lean on them.
Last meeting, I said I'd take a look at 22 and 29, which was the Silver Lake and Lake Ripple articles. So I started out with taking each of the 11 sections of each bylaw. They each had exactly 11 sections, and they all covered the same topics. So I put them together in a document aligned, because while they cover all the same topics, they're not in the same order.
Yeah.
I think like 1 through 6 are in the same order, and then 7 through 10 are in different orders in the other two, and then 11 is the same. Some of them were exactly the same, some were very similar. So from that, I put together a suggested motion that has all of the full text of the article to be replaced. And I can share the full thing with the analysis afterwards. So this is basically, this is the entirety of 22 and 29. For the most part, the only places where there are any differences between the two were section 1, which is allowed to have motors with a maximum of 5 horsepower on Lake Ripple, and section 2, which actually lists a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on Lake Ripple. Everything else is pretty much the same. There was a little bit of difference in section 3, because it talks about private property abutters on Lake Ripple. And I don't think we have any of those, or there might be 1 or 2 properties left on Silver Lake, so combined it anyways. So even if there are no private property abutters, it doesn't hurt to say
Right,
what they are there. So-
right, so it sort of goes without saying that if there's something relating to private property butters and on a particular lake, there are none, that just doesn't apply.
Yep.
Not a problem. So, yeah, that,
But by and large, what you've done is you have retained the differences between the two lakes.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's subject to a further discussion with interested parties would be whether those differences should be retained.
Yeah.
But as a starting point for discussion, I think putting it together like this is good, and then.
Yeah.
You know, for future discussion will be whether the distinctions between the two bodies of water should be retained, or whether they should be, you know, whether the rules should be the same where they are currently different.
Yeah, I think part of the difference is that Lake Ripple has a boat launch and Silver Lake doesn't.
Yeah.
So Silver Lake can only have boats that you can carry.
Yeah, so there, it may very well make sense to preserve those differences.
Yep.
But yeah, that's something that we can. Just keep in mind that we will ultimately want to at least ask that question. Let's see, and what else? In terms of the proposed updates that we've been working on, and we've, you know, just in the last couple of days, most of us have circulated with the rest of the committee the things that we've accomplished so far.
Yeah.
And we can, and we don't necessarily at this point need to nail things down completely. Although I suspect that at least some of what we've put together so far is, it pretty much reflects what we had commented on and what's likely to end up being our proposal. But we can review those amongst ourselves and, you know, maybe answer any questions that might come up or propose further changes on top of what we've already written up. As far as how we want to collect these changes together. What I'm working on, the one I shared with you guys was community preservation. And, you know, that was fairly straightforward and minimal changes. One element of that, and I think I put a note in the document that looks like scrivener's error or whatever we want to call it, something that doesn't reflect what town meeting voted to change in the bylaw. I think we probably noticed a few other things. I noticed a number of elements of that nature in the wetlands bylaw. I'm still working on that. I'm trying to figure out what town meeting actually voted, because some of what's in the current version, the current printed version does not reflect what town meeting actually voted. All right. Skip is communicating to me through Sue. Skip wanted us to know he's got a new computer and it's uploading new updates to Zoom. That's why he's not on now.
Technological plans, trains and automobiles.
Anyway, so, I'm still trying to dig through. I've gone through all of the town meetings from the time the wetlands bylaw was passed initially in '87. And I'm trying to reconstruct what town meeting actually voted for that. There's two pieces of information I do not yet have. One is the set of bylaw updates that the last bylaw committee did in 2003, because those were not printed in the warrant. They were compiled in a separate document. I've asked the town clerk's office if they could dig that up for me. I also asked
They're in the
them,
committee minutes. So they should have them. The bylaw committee minutes.
it should be.
Yeah.
I don't recall that we've seen them though.
I saw them in there when I was pulling stuff out.
Did we all get copies of
I
that?
didn't make copies of that.
Okay,
I just pulled out the stuff about general philosophy and stuff like that.
yeah,
Not
so,
specific changes.
so yeah, that document is certainly there. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of us getting a hold of it. And the other meeting I wasn't able to review is the May 1992 annual town meeting. The minutes of which were omitted from the 1992 town report. Yeah, so I've asked Paul if he could dig those up for me as well.
Mhm.
So once I have a complete record, I think I know everything that town meeting did, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Because there is a gap. Where I can see something was changed, but I don't have the town meeting record to know exactly what the wording was that was changed.
Mhm.
But on that, I am going to end up with a document representing what the bylaw should currently be.
Mhm.
And from there, we can work on changes that need to be made. So I'm a little bit concerned we've seen a couple of examples of where the current official copy of the bylaw does not accurately reflect what town meeting voted. And I'm reluctant to suggest that we go back through all of town meeting history and review every single bylaw change that town meeting has ever made and try to reconstruct what the bylaws ought to be. Only when there's evidence that something has gone wrong.
Do you remember? I think I might have asked this last week. Do you remember when they were first adopted?
There is a reference to bylaws being adopted in 1958. There may have been bylaws previous.
Is there?
Can you hear us?
I hear Skip.
All right, taking a break. Right here, the Patriots were guaranteed a playoff by every single year, but those games are on. It's their only second seed. How can I take a first thing?
Skip,
I'm so affordable confident. It can buy candy outside from me. Hearing about it. All in bomb. Federal formula. So for experts need to say.
hey, Skip, can you hear us? So I just updated a bunch of bios and. Skip can hear us. Yep.
Frequent mild to moderate activity, possible. We are full. The communicant use stage. Fast. Or non-spot free, apply directive here. Help your skin feel less itchy, less irritation, or relief. All without steroids or injection.
Hey, Rolly.
So he's getting the boss to see what's up.
Uh-huh. All right.
We need to mandate Skip attend in person.
No,
Going once?
So as far as going back to the topic of the updates that we're working on, and we've got, I guess generally the idea, probably a reasonable idea is for, to create a separate document for each article with the changes highlighted in one way or another, whether it's the way I did it or Skip has a variation on that. It probably doesn't really matter too much as long as when you read it, you can see what the changes are. At some point, we'll be putting it all together in the form of a warrant article.
Yeah.
Which would be very different. Sort of what I sent around was an example of how I did the zoning bylaw change for the marijuana zoning.
Mhm.
Where for the purposes of discussion, we had more of a more complete document with changes highlighted.
Yeah.
In different colors. But when we wrote it up as a warrant article, we wrote it up somewhat differently. But I like being able to read the whole bylaw article and see the highlighted changes. But that's generally not how you would put it on a warrant. But we can worry about crafting the warrant article when we get to that point, but until then, it's probably better for us to be seeing the proposed changes in a readable format. But unless somebody thinks otherwise, I'm not going to say that we should mandate a single format for all of us to use. It's whatever we're comfortable with.
No, and I mean, there's clerk or I can, I'd be fine with, I think when we get to a point where we're submitting something, to town administrator's office or for inclusion in the warrant, I think we'll need everything to look the same then.
Yeah.
And so if it doesn't already, I'd be happy to kind of lead the charge with, streamlining and conforming everything to a single presentation, but I think when we get to that point, we'll have to think about how we best want to present some of these things. I think in some respects where we're making, somewhat minor changes here and there, it might be easiest for a reader to see kind of the presentation that we're using now. So here's the full text of the bylaw. And here, within that context, here's what we're changing. There are gonna be areas like, 22 and 29 where it probably makes sense to just say, hey, we're repealing the whole thing, and here's the new text. Like we've done. in
Right,
some
right,
places.
22 and 29, I think this is probably a better presentation.
Yeah.
A more comprehensible presentation, because
Right.
we're trying to show some kind of a marked up version of that. would- Yeah, in that case, sort of a document with markup on some of the others. It doesn't look so good. So it's probably best to say, let's choose for the proposed changes, for each article, we'll choose a presentation that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I tend to not like the repeal and replace in their entirety unless it's something really, really significant, in which case there needs to be some documentation there about giving an overview of what was changed.
Yeah, so for something like this, your description of saying we've got these two things and they largely line up, although not necessarily in the same order.
Yeah.
But by and large, they largely line up, and as you've written it here, you've retained the distinctions between the two water bodies where the current bylaw has this distinction. So I off the top of my head, I can't think of a more readable way to present it.
Yeah.
Just because the two bylaws are so similar to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do like a side by side, you could have a 2-column presentation, Lake Ripple on one side and Silver Lake on the other side, and kind of match that up there.
Yeah, so this is the format I started. So I have the Article 22, Section 1, Article 220, Article 29, Section 1, and then I wrote the combined section underneath it. And then when all that was done, I pulled out the combined ones into another page, so it'd have the.
Trying to think where I've seen side by side presentations of old and new versions of things, and there's some software changes, some code changes, code diffs that
I do
present it that way.
all the time.
I think I've seen Microsoft Word has
It has a compare.
it has a compare documents function, which I've used often. I think one of the possible outputs of that is side by side. Although it's been a while since I've tried that, but I think I remember seeing that. So that might be a useful presentation for this, although I'm not sure. It might be worth trying.
Yeah.
Just to experiment as an experiment.
Yeah, it's just some kind of the weird differences. Section 22(7) is no person except an emergency, so bring land or cause to descend on Silver Lake, any airplane. And when they did section 29, they changed airplane to aircraft.
Yeah.
So like, okay, one slight word.
It's two different words, but
Hello.
Hello?
Hey, so I called in on the Zoom call-in thing, so I
Yeah.
can hear you guys talking. I guess you can't hear me and I can't talk through Zoom.
We can hear you.
We can hear,
we were hearing something through Zoom.
yeah, but I think we've been hearing you the whole time. When,
All right,
yeah,
so I guess you can't see me, but I can't even hear. I can't hear you guys at all.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, well, now I'm talking to you on the telephone.
Right. Yeah, so
So
it's,
I guess I'll just. I don't know.
you sure your speakers are on?
Yeah. I mean, if I listen to something on my computer, aside from this Zoom call, I'll hear it on my computer.
yeah. So that's kind of a mystery, is why your computer wasn't receiving the audio from the Zoom, because Brian and I are both have Zoom running on our laptops here in the room, and the Zoom audio does come through on the laptops.
Yeah, well. All right. So you guys can hear me through Zoom and through the telephone, but you can't see me.
Yep, your telephone doesn't do a very good job of transmitting video. Of course, when you were on Zoom too, Zoom thought you had video enabled, but we were not seeing your video.
Right, and I'm still on Zoom.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and
Yeah, like I said the last time, I'm better off just showing up at the town hall.
yes, there are some advantages to meeting in person. We're not subject to the vagaries of technology. Anyway, so where are we at in terms of,
So I think, or if you want to recap for Skip, so I think we're talking about, for the handful of articles with marked up changes that we've circulated, Dave went with one yesterday and Skip, you and I today. Greg provided hard copy handouts of a combined Article 2 and 29 proposal that I'm assuming you'd be able to send that out electronically.
Yeah.
I think what Dave had suggested was that we all kind of review what's been provided by people with the articles that they've taken the lead on. And maybe by next meeting, provide any comments back on anything incremental we might have, and then plan on acting on those at the next meeting.
yeah, I mean, I think, we're fairly flexible in terms of, getting this all done.
Yeah.
And we basically, at our last meeting, we decided it's time for us to start working on some of these edits. And so we picked off a few articles and a few work items, and we'll continue to work on those. We can line up a few more work items as they come up, as it makes sense to do so, and we'll just sort of keep accumulating that. No hard deadline as far as providing comments on each other's work. I think it seems like for now it can be pretty informal. We'll just, we'll just collect the work on each bylaw article as we do it. And some we may do some work, and then we may do some more work on the same article. And just as we go along, our schedule sort of, the timeline we worked out sort of called for us to have maybe enough proposed bylaw changes by sometime in January that we could start presenting those to the public. Well, that I'd say there's a fair amount of flexibility there too, that it sort of, at least in my mind, that was more like at some point early in the year, early next year, when we have enough proposed bylaw changes that it's worthwhile soliciting public input on those. And then we start, we can start, and I think we had on our timeline at least two sort of public forums on that. One in January, maybe it could be February, then one later on, like in May or thereabouts, when hopefully we'd have everything pretty much nailed down to where we think it is, and subject to final review by council and all the other, parties that would be interested.
So maybe even it could make sense to line that up for either late May following town meeting. So we use town meeting as an opportunity to announce or advertise that.
That probably
or
makes sense, yeah.
So I don't know if you are considering what I had sent along today. It's easier to make light of it because of what's there, but the proverbial neutering of the town bylaws.
Yes.
And how many times he appears, but it's part of other words. I think it's kind of, I went through it a couple of times, and it looks like there's only a he, she, it kind of deal in a couple of the places other than the three areas of concern that I sent along, but they would be like the town clerk, the town accountant, and the third one that I sent with some proposed changes. But, and they would be easy for Brian to make the changes, and that's why I didn't like copy and paste the whole section back in
Right.
and send that along for those three parts. Also, some of those three that I mentioned in the bottom of the last note that I sent along were probably going to get changed by the town's animal control officer, which is what I took from the town clerk's note, making reference to a certain person's name, which I forget, but she wound up being the town's animal control officer, so that she would have comments about the animal control rules. So I did not include changing the term dog catcher or whatever that was into animal control officer at the same time. I feel like every time I look at this stuff, it just gets worse and worse, or more detailed and more detailed, what needs to be changed.
Yeah, I think, that topic of, going to gender neutral language, for lack of a better term, that sort of crosses the boundaries, it potentially touches on many different bylaw articles. And so that's sort of not like just one change that you would make. It's it touches here, touches there, and one, and like you were just describing, Skip, with in the case of the dog article, there are some other changes that are, are in the works there. So
But
yeah.
some of the other stuff appeared in the public safety articles, and they seem to be really minor and editorial in nature. But getting back to the three documents that I had sent along, I'm not even sure that when you add those to the issue of, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, the changes in the administrative code for the town that appear at the end of the bylaws, which we had all kind of scratched our head about, is why is the highway department or whatever you want to call it, that's at the end of in the form of an appendix. Well, the town's charter requires that the administrative code be documented at the end of the bylaws in the form of an appendix.
Yes.
So that when, as I'm looking through the sections of the three parts that I sent along, that talk about bonding, I started to scratch my head about where Mary Laurier would fit in as the finance director, and then started to look back to see where she would be as to where she is in the hierarchy, and realized that she must be in a position that was created under the administrative code, and there's procedures for changing, for want of a better word, the hierarchy of who reports to who in the administrative code of the town, and there's a thing that requires you to post changes to the administrative code. Well, the administrative code doesn't appear anywhere other than that little thing about the highway department, or whatever you want to call it, that's Appendix A at the end of the bylaws, that we all wondered why the heck it was even there.
Yes, in fact, right, I had noticed that same thing in the charter about the administrative code as an appendix to the bylaw. So number one, the administrative code is technically not part of the bylaw, but it is in the bylaw document. But other than when it was put in there to reflect the DPW creation years and years and years ago, it has not been kept up to date as the charter says it should have been. Right?
It would appear to me that the creation of a position of the finance director, and this is not to pick on the person nor the position. But if the position was created under the concept that the town administrator can create a position like this, there's a process that's set out to do that. And then the change has to go through the select board in an advertisement process and then be placed in the town report at the end of the year. And that doesn't seem to have occurred. And I'm not sure how or when or where that happened.
Right, no, I remember not too long ago noticing the exact same thing about these procedures for administrative organization not having been followed to the letter. And that's, as I recall, that's the charter.
Right, that the ability of the town administrator, and I'm not questioning his ability or any of what happened or the town's need to have any of that. It's just how it happened so that it could appear at that part of the charter. And every time I go back and look at something, I was looking through the charter and I said, oh, that's where the highway department appendix that we had talked about. Why does that appear in the bylaw? Well, it appears in the bylaw because it's required in the charter. So that's got to stay there somehow and be modernized and updated with the changes to whatever the town administrator has done there with respect to the highway department, for want of a better word, or Department of Public Works. And if that's where Mary's position came from, that's got to go there as well.
Yeah, I think there are probably a number of positions that have been created over the years, basically by the town administrator, possibly with the approval of the select board, although I'm not even sure how often that happens. But I think the point is well taken that Appendix A does have a role here, but at the best you can say about it, it is sadly out of date. You might remember, Skip, that years ago, we were changing bylaws to add and remove specific positions in the departments.
Yes.
And we long ago stopped doing that. And that's probably basically that's, I don't remember exactly when we stopped doing it, but it's probably has to do with this provisions of the charter that allows the administrator to make such changes to the administrative organization and without having to get a bylaw change to make it happen. But as you know, Skip, those procedures outlined in the charter appear to have not consistently been followed.
I don't see that they've been followed at all, much less inconsistently followed.
Well, and I mean, so none of us are lawyers either, but I'd like Ginny's opinion on what the administrative code section would require, because it's, so the town administrator, after consultation with the select board, may from time to time prepare and submit to town meeting plans of organization or reorganization. This sounds like it's the creation of a new department, or a reorganization of an existing department. I don't know that, hiring a finance director, qualifies as a reorganization or a creation of a new department. So, I mean, before we kind of go down the path thinking that something was done incorrectly, I'd say, the creation of a DPW, that seems like something that it makes sense that you'd want town meetings buy-in on. You're creating a town department that's going to have, annual recurring costs associated with it, the whole 9 yards. I think the town administrator has vested in his position, everything that he needs to build an administration around him that can run the town. So I'd like Ginny's opinion on kind of what this code really is intended to drive. And, to the extent that, this section of the charter certainly isn't DPW dependent, but it seems like the creation of the DPW is the only time that, this administrative code's been kind of invoked. And yeah, I don't know whether that means that, we haven't had other instances when it would have been applicable, or we have, and we, for whatever reason, haven't followed the correct procedure, but.
Yeah, as far as the work of this bylaw committee is concerned, it's fairly clear from the charter that that administrative code is not part of the bylaw per se. It's published as an appendix to the bylaw. But it's fair to, to want to try to clarify, and maybe just because we've noticed this, it would be fair for us to bring this to the attention of the town council and the administrators as to, here's what the charter says about this. What does that mean for us? Does that mean anything for our work on the bylaw committee in particular, but more generally?
So Dave, to take the words out of your mouth. So you've got to start following the charter and paying attention to it. And it's not to say that anybody has intentionally done this, but the way I came across this, Brian, was in looking at the bonding requirements in the 3 different sections that I looked at. The town accountant is not required to be bonded. The treasurer collector and the town clerk are required to be bonded. And I said, okay, I'll do a search to see what's in Mass General Law. Then I came across the 2 documents that I forwarded, which is one that's from the DOR and the other document that I sent along. So it would appear as though, to start with, that we don't have to have the bonding requirements in our bylaws because, or first, but let me back up. If we do not impose a requirement that's higher than the statutes and the guidance that's provided by the DOR, then we don't have to mention it in the bylaws. If we're going to go over and above that, then we do need to mention it in the bylaws. Right?
Right.
And then it goes along to, okay, where is the finance director in relation to the town's hierarchy? Are they over the town accountant in the treasurer collector's office? Wait a minute, where does the finance director come from? I can't find the finance director anywhere in the bylaws or in the town charter. So as I'm looking through, again, going down yet another rabbit hole, I come across the Appendix A thing that we had talked about in the past and say, okay, perhaps the finance director was appointed by the town administrator underneath that section. Well, if they have, there's a process that you follow to incorporate that position into the town. Well, first off, did we follow that? Was the town administrator aware of that? And does that position have to get bonded?
But it's not a position. She's the town accountant. So she's
No,
got.
no, she's not.
She is.
She's the finance director.
Oh, she's the town accountant. And so she's got an extended title, but in terms of her position as it fits into the bylaws and the charter, she's the town accountant. And I just pulled it up on the new beautiful town website, and on the page for the town accountant, she's listed as Mary Loria, finance director / town accountant. So I don't think it's not a new position. It's just kind of I don't know why we added that to the title. Maybe it's to imply that she does more than what might be traditionally
Yeah, there,
seen as a town accountant's role, but
yeah, there is something that probably deserves some further thought, because yes, yeah, her job title was intentionally include, sort of formally finance director. She's, part of her role is as town accountant. But I think they adopted the term finance director as a better reflection of what they felt her responsibilities were going to be. So it was, in other words, she's more than a town accountant.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I think what Skip is saying, there's really no documentation of that. And a fair question would be, does that need to be mentioned in the bylaw? What is it? Where does that all fit in? Now because we've got the charter provisions for an administrative organization, which potentially relates to some of that could be done by bylaw. Some of that is just subject or brought to for a town meeting vote or some kind. That's something I haven't had a chance to review that recently or really think about it. But I think there are some questions for town council and for the town administrator, to sort of try to clarify some of that, try to eliminate some of the potential confusion that currently exists.
yeah, and to me, I mean, as long as the current practice and the plan would be to have, for whatever reason, we've got these two titles, have them both satisfied by one individual. I definitely wouldn't see it as any sort of reorganization or anything that would need to go to town meeting vote. To me, that's the town administrator running the town. And if we ever got to a point where those responsibilities are being split out into two separate positions, then currently, finance director isn't listed under the roles that are right for the town administrator to be appointing. So then I'd say, we might have a question about, so if we have a finance director, who appoints them? Do we have to go through this administrative code process to, reorganize the finance / accounting department? But to me, as long as they're both being filled by a single person, that certainly doesn't feel like it rises to any sort of reorganization. So the main reason what I'd be interested in, getting clarity on it is, and Dave, I think I had mentioned to you in the past that I think one way that we could simplify the appointment section is to, list out the appointments that fall under the select board's purview. And then, like I say, because his role is to run the rest of the town, I'd like to simplify section 9-2 of Article 1 to leave all other appointments under the purview of the town administrator, and to leave it more general than to have to list out the umpteen, different appointments that are listed, presently. And so that issue would go away.
That particular point is something that relates to my work on boards and committee appointments, is that Article 1, Section 9-1 and 9-2 enumerate a whole slew of appointments, and those as much as possible, I would like to reduce those lists to the bare minimum necessary for the bylaw. And so
Right,
bylaw,
and Dave, those would be the ones that the town has chosen to overwrite statute and pass by specific charter changes, and that's it. So I guess getting back to the big three that I sent along, the bonding requirement. We don't have to put a bonding requirement in the town's bylaws because it's by statute. The statute says you must have this, and you refer to the Department of Revenue, the Office of Local Services, minimums depending on the amount of cash that's handled over the course of the year by the different departments. If the town chooses to purchase or require that those people have more, then that should be in the bylaw, but otherwise, it doesn't belong in the bylaw at all.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. If state law talks about it, we don't need to repeat that in the bylaw unless we are changing.
And I think, while I don't think it makes sense to repeat the details, it could make sense to say something along the lines of, you know, bonding requirements as prescribed by MGL, yada, yada, yada. Just so that we've got a reference in our bylaw, so that, you know, someday down the road, it doesn't escape somebody's mind when we're changing one of these positions, that, oh, hey, by the way, this person needs to be bonded. You know, that way, if we just reference the Mass General Law, anytime that there's an update there, it's gonna be incorporated. We don't have to get into the specifics
Yes,
in good place.
and if the legislature changes the state law, regardless of what we say or don't say in the bylaws, we are obligated to follow state law. A related topic, Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 1, lists a number of town officers that are to be elected annually, unless some other provision is made by bylaw or charter. So, for example, under Chapter 41, Section 1, we would be electing a town treasurer, collector of taxes, assessors, auditors, highway surveyors. So these are things that we need to mention in the charter says, the charter has something to say about some elected offices, but where state law says you elect like a treasurer, we have to say in the charter or the bylaw that our treasurer is appointed by the town administrator. So that's the kind of thing that we do have to mention, that because we're different than what state law prescribes. State law explicitly allows us to do this by bylaw. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, going through that's the sort of thing that I want to pay attention to in those, you know, section 9.1 and 9.2 in terms of list of appointments. That where we need to say it, we will say it. Where we don't need to say it, we shouldn't say it.
Right. In other words, whenever we've changed from statute, we include it in the bylaws and that's it, or the
Yep.
charter.
Yep. So yeah, the stuff you sent out, Skip, today, I haven't had a chance to read through that yet. Yeah, and I certainly will, but. Yeah, I mean, we can continue, you know, and continue our work as needed. Although we haven't received any new stakeholder input since last meeting. There's a couple of other bylaw articles that I've started looking at. I mentioned earlier that I've been pestering the Affordable Housing Trust for their input. And there's at least one item in the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw that I think needs to be changed, but I will, and also because it relates to my other work on more general work on boards and committees. I will take on the Affordable Housing Trust article. I will also take on the marijuana limit article because I had a lot to do with writing that. The section 2 of that article, in fact, I wrote the revision that we adopted last year, last year. So the section 1 of that needs considerable rework. But,
I just noticed that with the new website launch, we are back to the 2021 bylaws. So I just sent an email off to William and Candy to let them know that.
Yes, they still haven't. They have. Don't get me started on the website. So I just
letting you know not to go looking for the latest ones on the website right now.
right.
board and committee information and journal on the new website is not yet up to where it was on the old website.
Mhm.
They, for reasons that I don't fully comprehend, the process of transitioning from an old website to a new website was not a seamless transition, which is the way I would have done it had I been in charge. But be that as it may, yeah, the new website is still a work in progress. But yeah, so I will, we'll continue work. Are there any other articles that, while we haven't received all the stakeholder input, are things that we want to start, that any one of us is interested in starting to work on? And if we can't think of anything now, but for next meeting, if depending on what more stakeholder input we get, we might consider whether there's any other work that we want to start doing.
All right, so not to change a whole lot of stuff, but I just looked up camera. In camera's integrated webcam, it says an app is using the camera now. So do any of you guys that have more IT experience, that would be you three, it says troubleshoot or disable. Well, I don't want to disable it. And Brian, to your point about seeing a black screen, that's kind of what I see here. I have a camera in my new computer. No, so I'm not getting any help from you guys. Thank you so much.
I mean, I don't know the specifics, and I probably don't have the same kind of computer that you do. But, I mean, if it's telling you that an app is using your camera, it
Has to be this one.
yeah, you would think it would be Zoom. Zoom. You want Zoom to be using your camera.
Huh.
If something else has somehow grabbed your camera, yeah, I can't tell what it is from this end of things, but it sounds like something else has grabbed the camera and Zoom can't get it.
If you click the up facing arrow next to the video icon at the bottom of Zoom, you can click into video settings.
Right.
And you should be able to, run tests and.
Oh, wait. I'm gray now. Did that change, Brian?
No, you still look like the same black box.
Yeah, and it's I got select. So when I did the video thing, to select the camera, integrated webcam is checked. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like it should be. Zoom should be getting video from the camera on your machine.
Gomez. All right, that's it. Like I said last time, meetings in person from now on.
Yep. Something to be said for not having to fight with this technology. Despite all that the technology industry has done to make this technology supposedly easier to use, it's not always the case.
Yeah, I only seem to have issues with the owl thing too, right? And the last time we kind of had it, you guys were all able to meet. This time, you guys were all able to meet, and I can't get on to save my life.
Well, all you're missing, Skip, is the view of our pretty faces here.
Oh no, I can see you guys. You just can't see me. Fine, don't laugh.
No, so we're missing out. You're not.
That's right,
missing out.
we're the ones who are missing out. But the visual aspects of this meeting are really not important. I mean, it's the substance of what we talk about that's important. It would be different if we had some stuff to share on the screen, but then if you're seeing us, that's okay. It would just be a problem with if you wanted to share your screen, then we would have trouble seeing it. Aren't we having fun? Okay, so
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So certainly, we can all take a look through and see if there's any other articles that pique our own interest. And I think what I can do before the next meeting, or probably even shortly, I can send out a list of areas where we've asked for multiple stakeholders and, just looking through some house numbering. We asked for feedback from the Board of Assessors, Building Department, and Fire Department. Of those three, I'd expect that the most substantive feedback would have come from the Building Department and Fire Department. And we've heard from them with no requested changes. Haven't heard from the Board of Assessors yet. I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess we could probably start our work on that article. And Skip had some points that he was raised related to them. So, I think there's probably a few others where, we might be waiting on, say, the town administrator's feedback or something else, but we've heard from more direct stakeholders. And so, I can pull together that list of ones that, we might be taking a little bit of a risk by diving in before we hear back from everybody, but it's probably a measured risk at this point.
yeah, well, like I said earlier, I'm claiming Article 36 for the Housing Trust. I'm claiming Article 39, the marijuana limit, and Article 1, Section 9 on the list of appointments. I'll claim that much as stuff I know I'm going to be working on.
So, Dave, I do have a request for the Affordable Housing Trust that
Yes.
you amend the auditor part to be, and this is one of those things where, getting back to my big three note today, is we don't seem to have audits from them or the results of audits from the Affordable Housing Trust. The town does not have a quote-unquote town auditor. And in order to not have a town auditor, we should at some point in time in our history, going back to 1735, have adopted or rejected the requirement to have a town auditor and placed those responsibilities in the hands of our town accountant. We have not done that, I don't think. The town hires an auditor to look over the town accountant's accounting. So I would think that we would want to have the same auditor look over the Affordable Housing Trust's books to report back to the town, because the Affordable Housing Trust, I have not seen a CPA report back to the town ever. And that's required under the bylaw.
Okay. Take a look at that.
So I guess the stuff that I sent along today might be better handled just by sitting and talking at some point in time with Evan and saying, hey, Evan, what's the scoop with this? I find in different sections that different things are required to be kept by different or duplicate places like contracts or bonds. I wonder what the requirements are for bonds of anybody. The law requires that the clerk and the treasurer collector have bonds, and it looks to me as though under the general laws that those are the entities which are kind of allowed to have money. versus the way our town seems to have money out to many different places, like Board of Health, the building department, the highway department. I don't know who collects the fees for the conservation. So that bonding and employee dishonesty and stuff like that with money, generally under the law, seems to be kind of stuck with just the clerk who's authorized to collect money for different things. And generally the treasurer collector who you would pay money to for what appears to be anything. You know, like if you went to get a milk dealer's license in town, you would have to go to the Board of Health to find out how much it is. It's a whopping $2. And then you go to the treasurer collector's office to perfect the milk dealer's license by paying the $2, as opposed to paying the Board of Health the $2. So that kind of changes the way we do business as a town. But the law seems to imply that the two entities which have money are the town clerks and the treasurer collector. So who keeps those bonds and who keeps contracts? Because, again, the bylaws point in two directions like the Three Stooges. Go west. The contracts go here and it points in two different directions. Or the bonds go here and it points in two different directions. So we should just be pointing in one.
Yeah, that would seem to make sense.
Greg, wake up.
Yeah, we got our work cut out for us. We all have, seems like we all have some work that we can continue doing.
Yeah, I had another article on my list from last week that I did last time that I didn't get to. I wonder which one it was. I had the list, but I put it down somewhere before I left back. So
Yes, well, I don't know about anybody else, but after our last meeting, my expectation was not that the stuff we were going to take and do, that we would have it all done by today.
yeah,
Yeah, so I guess, Brian, how, you know, my wife was looking over my shoulder as I'm doing some of this stuff, and she says, well, you know, there's ways that you can make our word processing software do stuff for us. You know, we had originally put together, and I followed along with what Dave had done, was take and put cells in an Excel spreadsheet of what I thought issues were with different places. Somehow we've got to figure a way to get stuff into what you're keeping in the central location so that it all gets addressed. And I just don't know how to do that. We've kind of talked about this, about posting someplace where we can all do stuff in not avoiding issues with, but it being in compliance with open meeting law, but a retention place for all the changes that we may individually come up and suggest for you to copy and paste into what might be a final working document. Do you have any thoughts on how we submit stuff to you, or how you want to keep that?
So I think it's probably two phases. One, you know, at any point in time, anybody that has any issues or items that they want to make sure we track, and, you know, we've got a question that's open and we haven't necessarily wrestled an answer to the ground yet, I'd say that sounds like something we should probably add to the action item list. And so feel free to email that over to me, even, you know, one-offs as they pop up. And I'll get that incorporated to the action item list. And then from there, you know, it seems like the path we've taken is that we'll look for volunteers to take on individual articles, unless we, you know, there were a couple at the last meeting where we concluded, you know, we've heard back from the stakeholders and from those of us that have provided feedback so far, we don't have any comments or proposed changes, so we're effectively considering those closed until, or unless anything new pops up. But for any articles with comments, either from the stakeholders or from ourselves, it seems like we're taking volunteers to kind of take the first crack at plowing through those, like we all have on different ones so far. And so I think whatever format works best for each of us, to mark those up or to provide something new, like Greg did with Article 22 and 29. I'd say do that in whatever format, is gonna be the easiest for you to prepare and present to the group. And then what we were talking about probably before, you were able to hear us. Once we get to the point where we're presenting, we need to draft warrant articles, and we need to figure out how we're gonna present these items to town meeting. Then we'll need to make sure that all of our formats are aligned and we've got things looking pretty and copacetic. But until then, I'd say, use whatever format works best for you. It seems like we've all adopted, separate Word doc per article sort of approach. And we'll make it work.
Yeah, I think, right now, we've just been sharing documents by email. At some point, I'm not quite sure we're there yet, but at some point in the not too distant future, we're probably going to want to have on the website, under our page on the website. And right now, given the new website and everything being in flux there, I don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
But I think at some point, a little bit farther down the road, we can probably create a place, a subdirectory on the website for the individual bylaw articles or the proposed changes on a per bylaw article basis could be collected together there. So because partly for us to be able to, to see them and share them more easily, partly so that the public can begin to see the results of our work.
And the departments that we.
And yes, and at some point, and this, things on a per article basis for those things that are sort of, changes that are kind of contained within one article.
Yeah.
That kind of works. If you've got a change that sort of spans several different articles, how to present that as sort of on its own, kind of, I'm not sure what the best way is going to be to do that. But at some point, a little bit farther down the line, we're probably going to want to have a single document containing all of the bylaws with all of our proposed revisions. And that would largely be collecting together these individual, individual articles as we've, documented them individually. But at some point, I think we'll want to collect that together into a single document that represents our view of the changes. And again, for public consumption, for public review and consumption, it's something that's likely to be something more along the lines of, what some of us have already put together, which is the entire article with the whatever the word is, it escapes my mind right now, but with the markup, that's the word I was looking for, with the markup, so you can see what's changed. And once we've pretty well nailed that down, sort of the last step before town meeting will be to translate that into a warrant article. But that's really, that's just that's more of a procedural thing. We've already, we've identified all the changes, we've listed, we've got out, so we know this is what we know we're going to propose changing. From that, we would then write up the warrant, the actual warrant article language. That's really the last step.
Yeah, so my initial thing was just in respect to Brian having sat in his seat on many committees, is what's the easiest way for you to assimilate and put together what Dave just talked about? So instead of or taking stuff from the other four members of the committee in four different fashions, which is the easiest way for you to take it. But
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So if you're okay with what everybody sends in, then that's fine.
I think so, because we're not at a point where we're taking all of those and we're combining them into a single document or something like that, where, having like format would be helpful. I think as long as each of our markups of the articles we take on kind of stand alone as their own documents, then yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me if things look a little different from file to file.
Okay,
I mean,
so, yeah, so what I had sent along was there were a couple of places where there were he's and hims. But also like with the animal enforcement or dog officer section, I understood that we were going to get kind of a revised whole section of that, so I didn't even bother with it.
Right.
There were only a couple of places he, she, it's appeared, but then the whole idea of changing the dog control officer to animal control officer, if that's what was going to happen, that has to happen in a whole bunch of places. But if they were presenting omnibus stuff, then forget it.
yeah, I think for those three other articles that you mentioned in your email, where there are gendered language that we'll need to address, I think we can just leave that to, I think we're all on the same page that should be addressed. And so whoever ends up taking up the mantle on those three articles, can just make sure that's addressed. I don't think that's one issue that any of us need to, wrestle to the ground across the bylaws.
Right.
We can just, whoever takes up those three, does something to address those in their markup.
Dave, have we heard from the animal control officer about the for want of a better word, the unleashed dog bylaw?
Yeah, she sent back fairly extensive edits. That was an email, probably.
I think we got that back in September or thereabouts,
Yeah.
September, possibly October.
We can send that back out. I tried to include it, I think, as an attachment in the action items list, although I realized earlier this week that some of those attachments aren't actually able to be opened from the file. But yeah, we can email that back out, because anything that got emailed to the committee before Andy joined, he's not going to have access to either. So we can, I'll send that, my computer died, but I'll send that out after the meeting.
Yeah,
All
the
right.
animal, right, the animal control officer sent her comments in. I've got a date of September 19th that we received those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had only heard from Andy that we were going to hear from the animal control officer. So, all right, thank you.
Yep, just out of curiosity, I asked Word to search for pronouns as the whole word, so it wouldn't pick it up as part of the word. It finds 40 occurrences of the word he, 15 occurrences of the word him, and 86 occurrences of the word his.
That sounds close to
So
one.
I would say that most of those are covered by the changes that I have submitted to you or mentioned in those other three sections.
Yep, this is just this goes back to obviously the original, and to the extent that you've already got those covered, that's good, and to the extent that they'll be covered by someone else, that we'll make sure they get covered in the appropriate places.
So a quick little question: where defined in the personnel bylaw the he or she or him or her definition says that regardless of what him, her, he or she means anybody, do you want to change that? Because there's a definition of him and her in there that we could take. Yeah, so that would kind of confer some, and the only place that I saw it was under the adoption section, or the, oh no, wait a minute, maternity leave. That would give maternity leave benefits to hims in place of hers. Or hims and hers. So,
I mean, I'd say if we're working to remove gendered pronouns, then the language that would impart different gendered pronouns in place, you know, where a single gender is implied, becomes kind of moot if we're taking that language out altogether.
right, so I guess it just, in everywhere else, it doesn't really imply anything other than making everybody feel happy. But here, there might be an intent of the bylaws or what we offer to just apply to hers as opposed to hers and hims. So we should speak with the personnel person about whether they want to do that. And I think that this may have come up in one of the little sections that people had questions about to start with.
Yeah, and then like I said, I don't have it up in front of me at the moment, but if part of the issue is, you know, we're using somewhat antiquated language with maternity leave and stuff like, you know, something like that in Evan's rewrite of the personnel bylaw, you know, that very well could become parental leave or something.
Right,
that's not.
yeah, right. And yeah, you're making my proverbial point there is do we just wait to see what comes out of that?
On that one where we know Evan's planning on fairly substantial changes, I probably would lean towards waiting to see what his rewrite looks like, and then we can take any further edits from there if we feel strong.
Yeah, I'm not inclined to touch the personnel bylaw. Leave that entirely up to Evan. And yes, with with whatever Evan comes back with, we might want to tweak that. But I think, given that Evan's sense is that it needs a lot of work, and I'm perfectly happy to let someone else do that lot of work.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I don't want to sit down and try to rewrite that personal bylaw myself. No way.
Well, and that's one, I mean, just the nature of the beast. I assume he's probably going to be sitting down with counsel to rewrite the
Yes,
whole thing.
Evan, I think I understood Evan to say when I talked to him about that he would work with labor councils to bring that up to date. So it's, I mean, the few ways that I can recognize it's out of date, it's.
Yeah, pale in comparison.
I wouldn't want to try to fix it, but then I don't know. I don't really have a very good understanding of all the nuances of current labor law.
Lawyers will have a
Right.
Well,
All our input would conspire to mess it up further.
Yep. Let the experts do that. Do what they know how to do well. All right, so we're all set to keep working. Anything else on the general topic of what we're doing? Otherwise, the only thing left on our agenda is the minutes from last meeting.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to open up the can of worms late, but the only other thing that had was kind of an open question on a couple of the bylaws that I was touching was the concept of penalties. And I know, Dave, you had a general question kind of early on, how we want to handle penalties. Do we want, do we want to do some sort of wholesale review to make sure that we're not, a penalty isn't $10 here and $100 there, and just kind of bringing that into the line.
Yeah.
And then the police chief had some general comments on non-criminal disposition. So should we, where we have an article that specifies penalties, should we tread lightly there and not necessarily propose a ton of changes and kind of review that wholesale at some point?
That's kind of what I had been thinking, that that penalties show up in quite a few different bylaw articles. Non-criminal disposition shows up in several places, but not everywhere. Non-criminal disposition, as I'm sure Skip can remember, has been controversial in the past. So yeah, that's a topic that I think that's sort of a front to back look at everywhere in the bylaws where penalties are discussed. we'll want to, review those for consistency and appropriateness. And sort of take the topic of penalties as kind of a broad topic over all the bylaws. And I suspect what we will find is that there are a number of inconsistencies and overlaps. And we'll want to try to resolve those. And that's I recognize that as something I think really needs to take sort of a front to back look at that. But I haven't gone back and enumerated all the places where I see penalties and what they are and the scope in which they apply. So it has to be done.
Dave, there's penalties up the wazoo.
Yep.
And the few penalties that are actually applied under the town's bylaws are probably more in the form of parking tickets. Other than that, when's the last time you saw any of these tickets or violations assessed to anybody? Just a thought.
I can't say that I'm aware of any cases.
Probably, and just as the fire chief raised it, I'm assuming we probably assess people for open burning issues, but that might be one of the few.
And as I've postulated that a number of those violation notices that were issued are probably invalid because they weren't issued by the fire chief. But anyways, I digress. Have a nice night, gentlemen.
You're absolutely right. That is a topic that we will eventually have to cover. So if there's nothing else on that, then the only thing left is the minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved.
Okay.
Moved and seconded.
Yeah, we accept them.
Moved and seconded, that was implied. So, approve the minutes of November 17th as drafted. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any additions or corrections? Hearing none. Now that Skip's on remote, I have to do this by a roll call vote. Brian?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Skip?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. With that, I suspect a motion to adjourn would be.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Brian?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Skip?
Aye.
I could vote nay just to be confident, but I'll vote aye too. I want to go home.